yeah, you're right. I bet you're right.
But I wouldn't think they would have gone separately. There he is.
Yes. All right, my Monsanto pen's dying on me.
You have to talk to Santos about that.
There's a retirement in the afternoon.
Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Caught me off guard there for a minute. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. This is our in-depth meeting of the month, so as such, we dispense with many of the formalities that we usually do during a city council meeting, and we usually focus on more of an in-depth topic and have some presentation and some speakers to learn more about specific topics. So we're gonna get right into that, but first, we're gonna ask Cindy to do a roll call.
Councilmember Spread? Harvey?
Present.
Rockert?
Present.
Macedo? Brackett?
Present.
Fitzgerald?
Present.
Malcolm?
Present.
5 present, 2 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, Cinda. Right now, I would like to make a little addition to the agenda and ask Bob Miller if he'd come up to the podium for just a second, please. He had a couple of words to share.
We have a special guest here tonight that's on our committee that I think needs some public recognition for his years of service in portraying Norman Baker and Mark Twain, and that's Max Churchill. I'd like Max to stand up and let us show our appreciation for all the presentations that he's given for many, many years in our communities. Stand up, Max.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, and thank you, Mr. Churchill, for all of the things that you've done for our community over the years. We appreciate your service. We're going to move on with tonight's agenda. We're on number 2, and we're going to talk about some financials, and we have Nancy Leak.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
This is our budget basis financial presentation that we do every year. And this is a little different from the audit, and that won't be completed till probably the first part of December. But this is how the city ended up compared to the budget that was originally adopted in March of 17 and revised in March of 18. It worked earlier.
We've learned it has a mind of its own.
I should have left it on.
There we go.
Oh, there we go, okay. So this is basically in the same format that I've done it in other years. The most effort during the budget process is developing the general fund budget, and that's where the majority of the city services are funded from the general fund, and that's where a lot of the city's property taxes are used. So in the general fund, this is a fund statement, and it shows the different revenue categories. The largest funding source for the general fund is property taxes, and that's at $7.27 million going into the general fund. There's some other smaller taxes, utility taxes, hotel motel, cable franchise, the utility franchise fee. Then we have licenses and permits, fines and forfeits. Intergovernmental revenues, $838,000, and that's payments received from other governmental agencies, federal government, state government, and other local governments. Charges for services, $560,000. Use of money and property, and that's interest and rents. And then there's numerous other smaller revenues that add up to $958,000. So the total revenues coming into the general fund, $11,882,000. The next page of the PowerPoint, the expenditures, and this is by function. and what services are provided for the money that comes into the general fund. One of the largest areas is public safety. The operating part of public safety, that was $9,136,000 for last year. We do break this out between operating expenditures and capital on this worksheet. So down below, there was an additional $94,000 in capital for public safety, and that's police, fire, and animal control. The next area is public works, and that's $2.1 million in operations and another $423,000 in capital outlay. Health and social services, that's some of our subsidies, $55,000. Culture and recreation, over $3 million in operations and an additional $118,000 in capital. And that's the library, the art center, and the various park and recreation activities, soccer, Kent Stein, park maintenance, admin, the aquatic center. So there's a number of things in that area. Community and economic development, that was $818,000, and that's, a lot of that is the operation of the community development office here in City Hall that handles the building permits, the inspections, and that type of thing. And there's also some economic development subsidies that come out of that area. So the total expenditures, $18,475,000. So the difference between those regular revenues on the previous slide and the expenditures here shows that revenues are actually under expenditures by $6.592 million. And that's before transfers in and transfers out. So the next page shows a total of $7.5 million in transfers in. A lot of that is from the employee benefits tax levy, road use tax funds, the ambulance fund, which pays a portion of the cost of the fire department wages and benefits, some TIF funds, and perpetual care interest. There's also a total of $621,000 in transfers out, and that's for, most of that is tax levies that are required to be received in the general fund and then transferred to other funds. And that includes the transit tax levy and the levy tax levy. We also transfer to the equipment replacement fund and the computer replacement fund. So after the transfers in and transfers out are taken into consideration, the revenues and other sources, revenues and transfers in, are over expenditures and transfers out by $309,000, which basically means this is kind of the increase in the general fund balance during the year. So it's always good to have an increase or at least break even. Beginning fund balance was $4.5 million. Ending before encumbrances, $4.8 million. We did have a total of about $90,000 in outstanding purchase orders at the end of the year. So when we deduct that, the ending balance is $4,742,000. And the next page is kind of an analysis of where we thought we'd be compared to where we are. So when the original budget was done in March of 17, we had estimated the ending fund balance at $4,325,000. Last year, when we did the revised estimate for the year, that was lowered to $4,212,000. A lot of the reason for lowering that was because we weren't getting the revenues from the automated traffic enforcement camera at University. So that was the reason the estimate was lower. We actually came in higher than both of those numbers at the $4,742,000. And actually, the actual ending is over the revised estimate actually by $529,000. And that's somewhat of an anomaly. Things came together pretty good this year, but I don't think we can expect every year to come out as good as last year did. In the box, oh, and then if you calculate the general fund balance as a percent of actual general fund expenditures, it comes out to 24.99%. So we did increase that percentage during the year. There was a few things in the box that the encumbrances will be funded from road use tax, so it really won't have an impact on the general fund balance. So I've kind of noted that there. And when those are taken into consideration, the balance would be 25.35% of expenditures. There were several things requested to be carried over from last year's budget to this year's budget for a number of reasons. It totals a relatively small amount of $27,000. The drone services and engineering, some roof replacements at parks, Bermuda grass at soccer, some window shades at the art center, and some computer equipment in admin. So that will basically be amendments to the FY19 budget when we put that revised estimate together. This next section, we kind of compare revenues and expenditures to see just why our ending balance is $529,000 higher than what we thought it would be. So I'm just going to highlight a few of those. The tax collections came in slightly over our budget, which is good, just $2,000. I'll skip down. The road use tax transfer in was actually under budget, so it shows as the revenues being less, but it's actually less because expenditures were less. So we can't transfer in revenues if we don't have expenditures. The same with the employee benefits tax levy. Employee benefits in the general fund came in under, probably due to employee vacancies, new hires starting at lower rates, that type of thing. So that's under by $39,000. The transfer in from health insurance was under, and that's for the wellness program, that's $7,000. Hotel motel tax actually came in $42,000 higher than what we'd estimated. A portion of that is late payments on prior fiscal years' hotel motel taxes, but a very good year for hotel motel taxes. Then we get into department revenues. The building and zoning revenues were over by $33,000. Library and art center were slightly under $4,600 and $2,100. Parks slightly over by $1,100. Cemetery was under. Public works was over. Police grants actually came in under by $71,000, and some of that is due to a JAG equipment grant that we never got the authorization to use those funds. There was some federal holdup on using those, so that's part of it. And then the reimbursement from the school for the school resource officer. There was some staffing issues at police, and we didn't charge them for when we didn't have the second officer available. So that's under as well. The court fines actually came out $16,000 higher than our estimate. The automated traffic enforcement fines actually came in $100,000 over our estimate. We didn't have the university camera, but our collection agent does a very good job at collecting current and prior fiscal year fines. A lot of that's through the income offset program at the state. Other police revenues were over by $36,000. Interest was actually over $28,000. We are getting a much higher interest rate on our investments than we have the last several years, so that's kind of nice to see. Clark House, we had budgeted the Clark House cell towers in the general fund, but there was a notice from HUD that all that had to be considered as revenue to the housing project, so it's going to no longer go in the general fund, but into the housing. So the total that revenues and transfers were under by 2,800. However, a lot of that is to do with the transfers in being under because expenditures were under. The next page, it's how our expenditures came in compared to budget. And I've got this kind of by function of the city. And this year, all the functions came in under budget. And that really has impacted that increase in fund balance. So general government came in under by 135,000. And that's the administrative things, mayor and council, city administrator, finance, risk management, the city's insurance, building and grounds, maintenance. So that area in total came in under. Public safety in total came in under about 200,000. Library, art center, and parks, and this is net of carry forwards, came in under 40,000. Community development came in under 18,600. Public works came in under 9,400. And the only area that went over expenditures was because the tax levy collections were higher, and so the transfers out were higher. So that's not a bad thing that's over budget. So that is a lot of that reason that that the fund balance increase was because expenditures were under. And some of that can vary from year to year based on maintenance needs in the department. So it's not something you can count on continuing. Then I've got a graph of how the last 10 years general fund balance has increased. And if you'll notice FY 08-09, it was 1.6 million compared to the current 4.7 million. So City Council has made a concerted effort to increase that fund balance, first of all, from our previous 10% minimum up to the minimum of 16.7% in the general fund balance policy. And then our goal has been to try to further increase that. And so that has been successful, and it shows dramatically on the graph. The next is that same information, only as a percent of general fund expenditures. So we were at 10.8% back in FY '09 up to the current 25. And when I drop off a decimal point, now it does round to 25, even though it's 24.99. So general fund had a very good year, and we're in a good position there. The next area is the other funds. And I'm only gonna, pick out several to talk about, but the 2 slides back is where the footnotes are referenced to. So for each fund, I go through and say either revenues were under or over and expenditures were under and over, and what accounts for that change compared to budget. So the first column was the original budget from March of 17, what we thought each fund would be then. The next column is the revised estimate, what we thought it would be last March, the actual ending balance, and then a comparison whether that's favorable or unfavorable. So I'm just going to pick out several of them, but if you want to talk about any of the other ones, just ask me. But it's so the first one is general fund, which we just reviewed. So it's 530,000 higher than what we'd expected. I'm going to skip down to footnote 3, water pollution control fund, and that is 322,000 higher than what was expected. Revenues were 47,000 higher, and expenditures were under by 275,000. Footnote 4, collection and drainage, that is 71,000 higher. Expenditures were under by 57,000, and revenues were over by 13,000. Skip down to landfill, footnote 6. That is 76,000 higher than what we'd expected it to be. Revenues were actually over by 90,000, and expenditures were under by 13,000. Some of that is directly related to the increased waste volume, and a lot of that is from disposal of hailstorm damaged material. So I think that accounts for a lot of the increased waste volume. Footnote number 7, the transfer station. That's showing we're under by 157,000. The regular current year revenues actually came in over by 217,000, and expenditures were, actually they were also over the original revised estimate by 42,000. Some of the transfer station expenditures are based on volume that's received there, so there's more hauling cost, the more waste volume you have. So we try to estimate a reasonable waste volume, but the increased waste from last year seems to have been continuing to this year. The reason it is, the fund balance is under, we set up an allowance for potential uncollectible account from one major hauler as of June 30th, and that was $333,000. The city has a default judgment against this company, and we've started the collection process in an effort to collect it. But at June 30th, since this company wasn't an ongoing business, in discussions with auditors, we set it up as an allowance for uncollectibles. And if we collect part or all of that, that would turn around next year. Skip down to, actually, Boat Harbor, I just want to mention, it shows a zero. Oh, it shows a zero fund balance, which is 2,700 higher than what we thought. At year end, after reviewing the deficit that was in that fund of 13,000, we decided to go ahead and eliminate that deficit from the general fund. And there was enough unspent money in the park department to eliminate that deficit rather than trying to carry it forward.
Okay.
We do that in the Marina Fund every year. It's a smaller amount. Yeah, it's usually under 1,000 in Marina, but with that much of a deficit in Boat Harbor, we went ahead and eliminated that as well. Ambulance had a good year. That's number 12. Revenues were over by 77,000, and expenditures were actually also slightly over the original estimate by 7,300. Footnote number 16, the health insurance, and that's an internal service fund. So the city is basically self-insured up to the amounts where the individual stop loss and aggregate stop loss kicks in. And so last year was a pretty good year for employee claims. So we actually have a fund balance 500,000 higher than what we'd expected it to be. And again, that will help us set rates that aren't, if they increase at all for next year, it'll be more modest than it would have been otherwise. Because that can fluctuate from year to year. Dental insurance is similar, and that came out 19,000 higher. That's footnote number 17. The next page, I'm just going to pick out a few. Number 21, the road use tax fund. That shows that it's over by 547,000. The road use tax revenues actually came in higher by 139,000. The funding transfers in total were 408,000 less than what we budgeted. Some of that, 67,000, will be used for public works encumbrances. The $100,000 allocation for the sidewalks That work was carried forward till after July 1 and will be expended with the FY19 sidewalk program expenditures. And then Amendment 17 was carried forward for other public works related projects. But the increased balance net of the carry forwards is still 262,000 higher than what we'd expected it to be. So that can be used for more projects this current FY19 fiscal year.
Okay.
I think the last one I'll point out is number 22, the Clark House Sunset Park. We had projected a very small fund balance of 3,200 and actually came in at 82,000. Expenditures came in under by 96,000. Revenues were 32,000 higher. A big part of this is the cost for the storm damage repairs at Sunset Park. That was, we were still estimating insurance proceeds at the time we did the revised estimate. And then the last one, the Section 8, that's just a timing thing, whether HUD has the funds or we have the funds. It shows that it's less, but it's only because they hold our reserves now. And in the past, the city held our reserves. So yeah, the next 2 pages are those explanations, including the ones I kind of skipped over. So in summary, general fund had a very good year with that 25% fund balance compared to expenditures, and that was higher than the original budget and the revised estimate, and that more than meets the general fund balance requirements in the policy. I did quote in there that the policy actually provides that increased balances of 25% or more would enhance the financial stability of the city and allow more latitude in addressing revenues or expenditure fluctuations, disaster situations, and also demonstrate credit worthiness to our rating agencies. The ending fund balance in the general fund also positions the city pretty well going into this upcoming budget for the FY19-20 fiscal year. And those challenges, some of those are the same ones we had in previous years. Whether the state will continue funding the backfill for the commercial and industrial rollbacks, further challenges to the automated traffic enforcement cameras, and then actually the multi-residential property will also continue to be rolled back. There were positive fund balances in all the funds except for the city's refuse collection and transfer station budgets. The refuse collection, that was a planned deficit. We wanted to get that second automated truck, and so we expect that to be eliminated in 2 years. The transfer station does have a deficit because of that allowance that was set up. If we're successful in collecting that would help eliminate that deficit. The boat harbor and marina, as I said, they would have had deficits, but we eliminated those from transfers from the general fund. But other than that, most other funds are in a good position going into this next fiscal year. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Does anybody have any questions for Nancy?
I just
Go ahead, Al.
kind of had a question. 10 years ago, our fund balance was about 10%, which was not good necessarily. It's now up to 25%. Do you have any idea of how the 25% for Muscatine compares with other communities within the state? Is it above average, or do you have a feel?
There's, and Greg might comment, there's
25% seems to be the average that people or communities shoot for. There are several communities that are suburbs that have higher fund balances in the 30 to 35% range, but 25% is certainly very comparable with other communities our size.
I would guess then that the 10% was kind of in the lower echelon.
10% is very low, but that was also when M&E took effect, and the city was hit pretty hard with M&E, and that's my understanding of why that fund balance dropped so low at that point in time.
We obviously have been able to recover from that fairly reasonably.
I think we've all been working hard towards that each year. Yep.
Any other questions for Nancy? Thank you, Nancy, we appreciate it. We're going to move along with the agenda. We're going to have a TIF discussion. Greg, were you going to start that?
Yes, Your Honor. While Mr. Bryce Anderson is here with Bush Construction, he can make his way to the podium. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. While Mr. Henderson is on his way to the podium, Bush Construction is here tonight to request tax increment financing for a project across the street, or a 25-unit for housing, and I believe it was 15,000 square feet of commercial space as well. So from our perspective, this is a great opportunity for rehab of a downtown commercial and residential project. They're requesting 10 years, 100%. That's the last page of your packet materials. You'll see that. That's well within the range of our recent housing TIF programs. I believe that have mainly been at 15 years. Nancy did a comparison, I believe, and so it was well within the range of current or recent housing projects that the city has done. We think it's also justified given it's a downtown rehab, and rehabs of existing facilities are often more difficult and costly than greenfields. There's also some building code issues they're going to have to address with the stairwell that will be between their facility and Stanley's as well. So there'll be some code issues they'll have to deal with. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Henderson, who has a quick summary of their project tonight.
Yeah, so, well, Greg covered most of the highlights. So, yeah,
Welcome.
we're looking to renovate 216 Sycamore. The building was originally built, I think, in 1917. It was a bank at that time. In the 70s, when Stanley did their renovations, they infilled the bank lobby and created the mezzanine. So, for the most part, it's been a commercial building ever since. It's been largely vacant as they've relocated people into their newer facility. And so, for the most part, it's been a vacant office building. We're looking to renovate it into some really nice high-end market rate apartments with some high-end amenities, including an in-facility gym, storage for each of the tenants on floor, in-unit laundry, a business lounge, and all in all, just creating some market rate housing in downtown Muscatine, which I think you guys are in need of. So a lot of other communities in the Midwest you're seeing a lot of repurposing of commercial buildings into residential, and that's the plan here. So we're happy to be able to retain Stanley Printing, Sycamore Printing, in their current space, but also creating some opportunities from additional street level retail commercial stuff. And so it should bring some vibrancy to that building and a little extra vibrancy to downtown. But other than that, I'm here to answer any questions, but we're excited about the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Council, do you have any questions?
I don't have a question on it, but I will just state, just so everyone knows, I'm going to stay out of the voting on this at any point in time, just because I'm employed by the seller of the building. So I want to make sure that there's no conflict there, and I'm actually closely tied with some of the changes we're making right now in regards to that. So I don't want to give any wrong impressions. So that's why I'm going to step out of the voting, but I like the project, obviously.
Take a nap then.
Thank you.
Let me ask the question. I'm looking at what they sent me, my question is this for rental apartment or are these condos for sale?
No, these are rental apartments.
And average cost of rent is guesstimated or projected to be?
We'll have a range, because we have a range of studios.
Yeah, you said you have studios,
Ones and
50
twos, I mean, we already had a market study done. The rental rates are comparable for, into what's in the Quad Cities.
Just ballpark, give me a
So,
ballpark.
all right, well, so,
I mean,
I'm
see
an
you have a
accountant by
studio
nature, so
here.
I'm not good with ballpark. I'm more.
You have a studio, you have a one-bedroom, and you have two bedrooms. I mean, so, studio, give me a guesstimation.
So, one bedroom's gonna go right around for about $950.
Okay. So then my next question here is, not that I'm a bad guy, but where these people gonna park?
We have some parking on site that comes with the building. I've also been working with the city on the lot closer to the river where we'll reserve some spots there for our tenants. And then it's just a matter of also, I know I'm probably directionally dysfunctional, but there's the one lot that you can park in the evenings, but you have to be out of there by the time the leased parkers come in during the day. We're not going to encourage people to park there, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of our residents live there because by the time they get up and leave for work is when they need to be out of that lot in the first place. And or you might see that some of them are already parking and working down here, so they're probably might already have parking. But we've already worked with the city that we need about 10 to 11 spots, and there are currently spots available on the one lot closer to the river.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I've been doing adaptive reuse housing for the last 7-8 years, and parking's critical. So that was one of the things we need to make sure we solved, because everybody's got to have a place to park, and it's not Chicago where people are willing to walk blocks and blocks to park, and they need to have someplace close and someplace safe to be able to park, and we think we've got a viable option for that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
I can comment on, sorry.
Hang on one second.
Excuse me. Bryce, how many studios do you anticipate? How many one-bedrooms? How many two-bedrooms?
Right now, the plan is for 5 studio, 15 ones, and 5 two-bedrooms.
Okay, thank you.
So we're still doing some configuration on the second floor, and they may shift one unit one direction as we're trying to comply with some of the historic standards.
Okay.
But for the most part, that's the mix that's in place right now.
What's the average square footage going to be for the studio, for the one bed, and for the two?
I think our studios are in that 550 to 600 range. Our one bedrooms are in that 700 to 750 range, and our two bedrooms are around 11 to 1200. So some of that is anytime you're dealing with an older building, new buildings, you get to build exactly what you want. Older buildings, you kind of have to fit everything in where there's stairwells and everything else. So we're trying to maximize the rentable space, but also making sure we're providing efficient, usable apartments for everybody so that you don't have a wasted corner or a wasted closet. We think we've got some really great units that people are going to be excited about.
Okay, thank you.
Will you be individualizing the utilities, the gas and electric, or will that be included in their rent each month?
Our intent is to have them separately metered. We need to figure out how we're going to do that. But in general, we try to separately meter when possible, because then they can take care of their own electrical.
Sure. Councilman Brackett?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I believe in the packet, for one, it does have the layout of the current proposed layout
Yep.
of all of that building, and then I was also gonna comment that, I don't know if people realize quite how big the parking lot is behind there, but there's quite a few spaces that, from what I understand, I think you're getting most of our space.
Yes, in that little roundabout back there, we're getting
Right.
quite a few of those spaces, so.
Yeah. So,
Any other, go ahead, Councilman.
If things go as you would like them to go, what's your timetable?
We are hoping to get started with demolition and construction here in November, and I think we're looking at like a 7 to 8 month construction period. So hopefully be fall of next year, we'd be up and ready to go. We'd probably start pre-leasing, 60 days before that. So hopefully in the summer, we'll be pre-leasing and even have some of the upper floors ready and done to be able to show tenants the spaces, because in general, you start top down, so we'll start demolition and framing and work our way down, and so we should have some sample units earlier on in the spring to be able to show people to get an idea, because as much as you can do a virtual tour or look at something on paper, it's something different to walk in the space and see it. And one of the things I'm excited about is the views, not only at the river, but also looking north, are wonderful in that building, and so I think the views will really help sell the apartments.
So about a year from now, you hope to be,
Hope to be having
Leasing.
a whole lot of people moving in and creating a whole lot of commotion down here.
and if I read the blueprints right, or not blueprints, but the diagrams right here, there's 2 elevators serving the upper floors?
Side by
Yes,
side.
yes, there's 2 existing elevators that are there. I think we've got some, they're in really good shape. I mean, Stanley's done a fantastic job taking care of the building. I'm happy to report. I've seen much worse. So everything's in pretty good shape. We'll probably do a little bit of minor repairs and everything else, but yeah, there's 2 elevators serving the building, so there shouldn't be too much issue other than if we've got a whole lot of people moving in at one time.
And I noticed one of the apartments was, maybe more, but the one I noticed was a handicapped accessible type of an apartment.
Yep, we're gonna have a handful of ADA. I don't, to be honest, don't know the exact number, but we're working with the code and everything else to make sure we have ADA and adaptable units in the building.
Good.
Any other questions? Thank you. Do we need some kind of consensus tonight to move
Typically,
forward?
if there's no objection or if there's a consensus to move forward, then with that begins the process.
Thumbs up from Councilman
Thumbs up.
Harvey? Everyone?
Sounds good.
Sounds like we've got a consensus. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
We
I appreciate it.
Next on our agenda tonight, we are going to have a discussion about the Muscatine branding and marketing. We are going to start with the presentation by our city administrator, Greg Monsager.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I'll be very quick tonight. Kevin's got a couple comments, Greg Jenkins, and then turn it over to council, and then go from there. Just a very brief, a few notes and a reminder for everybody here tonight. The branding and marketing team was made up of these 7 entities that we started with. On the next page, this is the city's logo and tagline, but city's logo, and this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the city's logo and tagline. I just want to be very clear about that. On the following page, you'll see the recommended new logo for the city of Muscatine, and the variations that could be used for depending on its use. And on the following page, it includes the tagline as well, where the river takes a turn for the better. And then on the following page, just a reminder that there's this question that's come up about the Pearl of the Mississippi. The Pearl of the Mississippi is owned by GMCCI and requires the permission from GMCCI to use. Pearl of the Mississippi is not part of the city's logo. I just wanted to be very clear about that. That belongs to GMCCI. Our logo is simply the ones shown previously. On the next page, following some discussion, these are some options that we had come up with.
The team, or who's we?
Myself, Kevin, Greg, and Greg had reviewed these with several members of the committee.
Okay.
And really, adopt a logo and tagline. GMCC has already taken that step, as you know, and put forth the logo. Modify the tagline to incorporate Pearl of the Mississippi. Of course, this would require GMCCI's permission. Co-brand, use both current and new logo and the new logo and tagline. You'll see a number of communities, we're starting the web redesign process, and there are a number of communities that have taken their existing logo and co-brand it with new logos and taglines. So that is an option as well. You could also utilize the logo and the new logo and tagline as part of our city and community marketing efforts. And not take a step of adopting a new city or official logo at this time, and simply maintain the current logo as the official city logo. Obviously, there's the do nothing option, which would basically mean that we keep the sunset, which is what it is. You get many questions as to what it is, but on our letterhead, when you see the city's letterhead.
There it is.
If I brought it
Greg.
up.
He's got it back.
The bottom of many of our letterheads has the Mark Twain quote, and that's when people make the connection to what this actually is, whether it's a ship's wheel or a sunset or whatever it may be. But so that would be our fourth option. Our recommendation is one to either adopt the logo and tagline and move forward, but based on a number of based on the comments to date, really our preference or recommendation is to proceed with the new logo and tagline. However, given those discussions state, we would recommend that we simply use the new logo and tagline as part of our marketing efforts and leave the city logo alone at this point in time and see how it works. Get it out there with our partners that I mentioned up front and use it as part of our marketing efforts, but not change or officially change the city logo at this point in time. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. He's got a couple of comments, and then Greg Jenkins with the chamber.
Mayor, council, the discussion tonight centers on the use of the slogan "Pearl of Mississippi," and from the comments I've heard and read on social media and heard from the public, there seems to be a really misconception that the city is trying to remove that slogan from use by the citizens and business of Muscatine. First, as already mentioned, we don't own that phrase. It is it's owned by the Greater Muscatine Chamber of Commerce, and they have complete authority over it. Secondly, as Greg mentioned, it's not part of the official city logo and tagline or any promotional efforts that we have been undertaking. It is the sunset graphic. At times, I even have problems visualizing it as a sunset, but maybe we need a little bit more color to it, I don't know. But it is the sunset and the one word Muscatine. I've talked to many of the committee members, and it's my understanding that at no time in the development of the marketing strategy that they have put together was there any intention or discussion of removing the slogan "Pearl of the Mississippi," as it is currently being used by individuals, groups, and businesses. Muscatine itself is a very powerful and unique word. In itself, it is all that we really need for the tagline to identify who we are and what we are. There's no other Muscatine in the United States or the world, and that is why we feature Muscatine here and even on the new logos that are being proposed to be implemented in the partners marketing campaign. It's Muscatine, Iowa. As far as the communication and marketing strategy for the city of Muscatine, we focus on telling the story of Muscatine, and that's by highlighting the positive accomplishments of staff, departments, the improvements to the infrastructure, which if anybody's taken a look at Mississippi Drive lately and the benefits of raising that street as opposition to the flooding, you can kind of see where the vision came to reality in that regards. And we also highlight the programs that benefit the citizens of Muscatine, primarily those in the Parks and Recreation Department, the quality of life, healthy living, those type of things that truly benefit the citizens of Muscatine, which include the trail system. We also welcome any endeavor to spread the positive message to audiences near and far, including those that are looking to open or relocate a business in Muscatine. Those developers who are looking for one of the great investment opportunities that Muscatine has to offer, and we kind of heard a little bit about that earlier in the TIP discussion, and to individuals who are looking to relocate and live in Muscatine. That is one of the primary goals, as I understand it, of this marketing campaign. Our commuter employment is kind of high, and we of course like to all see those people live here. There's a lot of things we have to address to get to that point, but this strategy that was put together may be a step in the right direction. From my own research and review of the documentation of the North Star and the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Community Studies, both of which are on the website, you may remember that IISC study that was done by the students who were here 4 years ago now? I can't remember, 4 or 5 years ago?
2013, 2012, 2013? It's on the website.
I learned that the idea behind the development of this new logo and tagline was simply to create a unified marketing strategy. The idea is to allow individuals, groups, and businesses to join together in this campaign to bring new business, new developments, and new residents to the community. The logo itself can be used in conjunction with the businesses or groups' own logo. It's not to suppress their own logos, it's just to use in conjunction, and they don't have to. Just being a partner with us, or with the campaign, is enough for us to know that we're all working together toward the same goal, and I think that's the main idea here. For the city of Muscatine, that, as Greg pointed out, that means either adopting the new logo or including both the current logo and the Unified Marketing Campaign logo on our website. That is something that we have seen in our research for the new website design that we're doing right now. It's not blatant out there, but it is there, and it's a tool that just lets the people know that we are all kind of working together. Many municipalities have started doing this on their landing pages. It was kind of interesting also to learn that the tagline, "Where the river takes a turn for the better," was a survivor of a list of over 50 different ideas from a variety of sources that the executive committee and people they brought in to review these kind of went over and chose. It really aligns with the suggestions put forth by the IISC. One of those from the students was opportunities around every bend, which was the top choice of them study, and had to comment that this option offers a subtle historical reference, but places a majority of its focus on the opportunities in Muscatine. Again, that's kind of what we're looking for in any marketing strategy that we go forth with. We want to highlight those opportunities and give the reasons why you should live, work, and play here in Muscatine. Where the river is just a placeholder, and there's a little bit of confusion about that too, because what we're trying to, or what we kind of would like to see is individual businesses, groups, take and replace that "where the river" with "where recreation takes a turn for the better," or "where quality of life takes a turn for the better." Just revising that tagline to benefit their business and showing that they are part of the more general campaign to promote Muscatine. The major result from the studies by both North Star and the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities is that it is the river that made Muscatine what it is today, the reason why Muscatine is here, and it would be hard to imagine Muscatine without the river. As I look back and some of the history of Muscatine that you can find on the web, and there's plenty of history, let me tell you. And being here just 2 years, I love reading about the history of Muscatine and learning about it, which I kind of did the other day when I was listening to the mayor talk to our visitors from Ukraine. She was very good and very eloquent about talking about the history of the industries that really put a face to Muscatine to the world. So that kind of stood out for me too, and I thank you for that, Mayor. Major William Williams was visiting Muscatine in 1849, and back when it was called Bloomington, which is kind of predates Muscatine a little bit. But he said, "Bloomington is a fine town, one of the most important points in the state, and its situation on one of the great bends of the Mississippi has great commercial advantages." And the reason I point that out is that everything through that I can find, that I can read, all the studies that have been done, the present study, the past studies, all focus on the river. And that is where this tagline was developed. And that's the reason I think it is the right way to go forward. Now, of course, modification of the city's logo and tagline is a possibility. We could always try to figure out a way to incorporate Pearl of the Mississippi into that, but it could be very expensive for the city to do that on its own. One thing that you could do is for the council could request a feasibility study to be done. That would take into account that we'd have to go through the entire process that North Star already did with us, or the IISC people did with us, but that is also a possibility. I kind of ran out of room there, so I can turn it over to Greg and let him wrap this up, and then we can get to any questions from the public or comments from them.
Thank you.
Your Honor, while Greg's on his way up, just one point of clarification. North Star did agree to provide a few samples with Pearl of Mississippi included in that, and then GMCCI is going to take a look at that once in about 2 weeks or so when they come back. So they are looking at some alternatives that include Pearl of the Mississippi. So.
Greg, thanks for coming.
Hi, Greg Jenkins with the Greater Muscatine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Evening, Mayor, Council, friends and neighbors, concerned citizens, all of us who are, purpose, intent is aligned to do right by Muscatine and make it a great community that we already know that it is, and make it even greater. I will credit Kevin for stealing the vast majority of my thunder, which will make this even shorter, and I'm sure Phil will be very disappointed in that, right, Phil? But I do want to ensure all that we understand, and make sure that we understand that why we did this and the commitment that group has. Kevin mentioned it, but it's about improving Muscatine. It's about making us more marketable, giving us the tools to market Muscatine, to recruit business, to recruit people, and have the folks that live in Muscatine understand that this is a great town and to be able to market to them. And when I start seeing the tools and how we can put those to use, there is power in that marketing campaign. Where the river takes a turn for the better, yep, but where healthcare takes a turn for the better, where business takes a turn, where education, all those things are very marketable, and we have been given tools to apply with those lines. But I think it does well for us to not be afraid to honor the past, and also doesn't think it hurts for us to be able to say we've heard you. We understand that there's a great many people in this community who hold near and dear to their hearts the term Pearl of Mississippi. And I don't think there's going to be any changing of those minds as far as I've been in the conversations I've had so far. I haven't seen anybody saying, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I think we ought to do that. So we have commissioned North Star to take a look at this, and they offer up some potential alternatives. That is not a promise that that's what's coming back. It needs to be able to fit still the marketing capabilities that we're looking to do. But I did want you to know that we do have that under consideration, and we think it's worth taking a look. But I also think we ought to be sure that we respect and acknowledge that there's been a great many people generationally, across many generations, who have come to us and said, we think it's awesome. We think it's good that you're taking these steps. I think it's time for Muscatine to have a fresh approach and go market our community. And so with them, there'll be the other side of that coin that says, Jenkins, what are you doing? Why don't you just hold your line? Well, I think we owe it to us to take a look. I think there's enough concerned citizens that wanted to see what we might do. Mr. Eagle the other day gave me another class in the history of pearl buttons that every time I go in there, I get another class and I learn something new. So there's much to be said there, and I credit you for that, and I thank you. Let's see. I was trying to whittle out what Kevin already said, so I didn't repeat all of that. I am open to questions should those appear, but we do hope you'll take your time making this consideration, and that I don't know that there's need for anybody to say that this should or should not take place. Just let's see what happens, and we'll go forward. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Greg. Go ahead.
Hi, Greg, good evening.
Good evening.
This is not, I'm gonna be real poignant with this, because I can't begin to tell you how many people have given me their opinions. I've had people share their opinions with me in the shower at the YMCA while I'm trying to take a shower.
That would be too much information.
I think we're on the same page here. I sent an email, and I didn't include you today, but we talked about the chamber owning this tagline. And I'm like, I don't understand. That means this is some sort of intellectual property.
It's a mark that is registered with the state of Iowa.
Okay, so that's why I asked, who created the tagline? Who sold it to who? How much was it sold for? How was it paid for? And where's the documents and bill of sale? Can I review them? Can I see them? Just, because I'd like to see stuff.
Well, the guy sitting right here could probably speak better to that than I can, because he was part and parcel of getting the Pearl of Mississippi brought together to life initially.
Yeah, well.
So how that got into the hands of the chamber, I don't really know right now. I haven't found that file. I need to go back into the boxes because it doesn't show as an electronic file.
Yeah.
But it does, I mean, it is registered under the state. with
Well, like I said,
CMCCI.
I like to see some of that documentation. The other side is blatantly on an unequivocal amount of people have already just said no to the entire concept. And I look at it as, I had to think of it as a shopper, since I do most of the shopping for my wife. And I've learned that I can go and say, I want to buy you this, and I'm in the store, and she'll say no, and I put it back on the shelf because she said no, she doesn't want it. And I'm going to assume that majority of these people sitting to my left, you're right, are here because they don't want to buy whatever this is. And since they're the ones footing the bill, I'm going to go with what they want, because that's what I do. And so, like I said, I keep asking the same question and nobody seems to answer me, is we have a City of Muscatine flag that is really hard to find. And I actually spent 2 hours